Hello, TheDream.Us scholars. Thank you for joining us today for this exciting webinar. My name is Tanya Wilcox. I am a program director for the alumni programs and also for scholar programs. And joining me today is also Sadhana Singh, who is a former scholar of TheDream.Us, and she's an alumni, and now she works for us as a program manager. We are very excited to bring you this webinar on navigating graduate school. We know that many of you are exploring this possibility or perhaps applying already to graduate school. So we've put together for you a great panel of other students who are in graduate school right now in a variety of different fields. And one of them is also the TheDream.Us scholar. First, I want to tell you about Martha Ortega Mendoza, who has graciously offered to help lead this webinar. She's put together the majority of this PowerPoint. She used to be a scholar advisor for the TheDream.Us students when she was working at the University of California in Santa Cruz, and now she is working towards her PhD in education at UC Berkeley. And joining her, we have Yvonne Beltran, who is currently a medical student at Loyola University in Chicago, and she's going to share a little bit with you about her experience pursuing a doctorate degree in medicine. And then Emily Hernandez, who just published a blog in My Undocumented Life about her experiences of attending graduate school. She's an alum, and she is seeking a master's degree in engineering. And then we also have Pratishtha Khanna, who is with us from Southern California, even though she's originally from the state of Georgia, and she's following a master's degree in the biomedical field. And then finally, we have Jose Magaña Salgado, who actually already graduated from law school and has been practicing as a lawyer for a few years. And he went to graduate school before DACA even existed. So certainly his story is very uplifting to hear of how he's been able to reach his goals. So we will hear from each and everyone on this panel. But before we start, I want to give you some housekeeping items. First of all, please know that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be shared with everybody who signed up for the webinar. Second of all, is you'll see that you have a GoToWebinar control panel in front of you. And a couple of things about this panel is in it, there's a section called handouts. If you open that section, you will see that there are 3 handouts for you. If you click on those links, you'll be able to download that those handouts, and so you can have them on your computer, or you can print them, or you can bookmark them, or whatever. One of those handouts is the PowerPoint that we're going to go through today, and the other 2 handouts are 2 different graduate school guides that undocumented students from different universities have put together over the years with lots of tips for you. So I highly recommend that you go to those and you download them. Then the other thing you should know is that throughout the webinar, we will have moments where we will pause and allow you to ask questions. And there are 2 ways that you can ask questions. One is via your control panel. You will see that there's an icon of a hand that looks like this. And if you click on the icon, you're raising your hand, and basically you're telling us that you have a question that you would like to ask live. And at that point, when we call your name, you will need to unmute yourself and then ask your question. The other way that you can ask a question is by typing it in your question box that you can find on your control panel. So when we get to the times when we do Q&As, please use those 2 ways to ask your questions. Okay, so let's start. And to start, I'm going to turn it, before we do, actually, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Everybody's going to introduce themselves as they come into the presentation. Then with the first big section is going to be on choosing graduate school. What are some of the considerations that you have to keep in mind as you're trying to decide which school to go to? The third thing we're going to talk about is the role of advisors, which is very key for many graduate schools. Then we'll go into funding graduate schools. So there are lots of tips that are going to be shared and different ways that people are funding their graduate education. And then last is a few quick tips on crafting your statement of purpose or your personal statement, which is also very important, an important part of the graduate school application. But before we start, and then I turn it over to Martha, I want to launch a poll because we have a couple of questions for you, the audience, because we want to know who is here. So let me just launch this first poll. Okay, so please take 5 to 10 seconds to tell us where you are in your graduate school journey. So pick one of the 3 choices that you see in front of you. And it looks like about half of you have already voted, so we'll wait a few more seconds to get others to vote. So keep telling us. And then when almost everybody is done, I will share the results. So you all get to see those results. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in about 3 seconds. If I can. Sorry, I lost my cursor here. So Donna, can you close the poll from your end?
Yes, I can. Let me see.
Great, and then share the results, please.
There you go.
There you go. All right, thank you. So the majority of you are just beginning to explore, so you'll learn a lot from what these great panelists have to say. And now we have one more poll. So Donna, can you launch the second poll, please?
Yes.
There you go. Please tell us what type of grad school you're considering. Just a few more seconds before we close it.
Okay, we have about 80% voted.
Okay, let's close it in about 5 seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Okay, so about half of you are looking for a master's degree, and then some for a PhD in medical school, and some also interested in law. So great, thank you for responding to those questions. Let's go ahead and close that and go on to Martha. Please, you can go ahead and start.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marta Thea Mendoza, and I am actually a second year over at UC Berkeley, so I'm very excited to be with all of you. I actually currently advise students, many first-generation students who are thinking about graduate school. And some of the general advice that I have been telling, in particular, undocumented students to really think about how there's no one right path to go to graduate school. Some people decide to take some time off after they finish their undergraduate studies. And I always encourage that because it might give you definitely work experience in which later on you can bring into once you start your graduate program. So really there's no one correct path. Once in graduate school, many students, many first generation and undocumented students can definitely testify to the fact how once you're in graduate school, you feel like it's sort of imposter syndrome, meaning that you feel that you don't belong, that you got there by accident. So if you ever feel, once you're in graduate school, if you ever feel like this, just please remember you're not the only one experiencing this. Many students go through that same stage. I'm also currently going through the same stage. So I really want to emphasize you're not alone in this journey. As you can see, Tanya and other organizations are also trying to provide more support specifically for undocumented students who are thinking about graduate school. So definitely realize that you're not alone. All the emotions that you're feeling are many of the same emotions that other people are feeling. And really reach out to dreamers and reach out to different groups and support systems that are beginning to emerge across the country. If we can go to the next slide. As many of you responded, you're beginning to explore different graduate programs, which is great. When I always encourage students to think about when choosing a graduate program, you really want to be intentional in the sense of think about what is your long-term career goal. You may realize that what your ultimate career goal may not align with some of the graduate programs that you're thinking of. So really think about how you can merge the two. I really encourage students to think about what is the long term that they want to pursue and what is the educational trajectory that's going to get you there. There's definitely a distinction between master programs and PhD programs. And one of them is a PhD program does take much longer to complete. For every different field, there's going to be a different average of how long it takes to complete, but usually it takes around 5 to 7 years. So if you're thinking about a PhD program, really think about the huge commitment that you might be that you're going to be doing versus a master program, which is more practical. It's more intentional for people that want to go out and work, be in the workforce within the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. And really think about once you have honed in whether you want to do a master's or a PhD, really think about whether you want to go into a public or private institution, because it's definitely going to have an impact on the type of support that you have, as well as some of the financial resources, if any, available to undocumented students. We can go to the next slide. And as many of you know, unfortunately, there are really no laws that are in place currently that guarantee undocumented students to higher education, and this is also true for graduate school. I always encourage students to go to ULead, which is a really nice website that's very friendly, user-friendly, and basically, I always encourage students to think about what are some of the policies that are in place across the country. Some students may be thinking about going out of state, and you really want to be aware of what are some of the policies that are in place that might prevent you from either pursuing or that might become an obstacle, such as paying out of state tuition and so forth. So you really want to be intentional in doing your homework in advance. In addition to exploring programs, you really want to know what are some of the policies in place, and ULead is a really nice condensed website in which you will find many of these policies. Can you go to the next slide? In terms of graduate schools, unfortunately, I'm also finding out, given my own research interest on undocumented graduate students, there's not a lot of support services in terms of graduate school. This is something new. There are very few students who are in graduate school. Nonetheless, it's not impossible. So some states and some institutions are trying to build support for undocumented graduate students. With that being said, you definitely want to apply to a wide range of schools, whether they're public and versus private. You definitely want to also tap into some of the private institutions. You want to apply to them because they have more leeway in terms of their financial aid packet that they can allocate to undocumented students versus public institutions where they might not be as they might not have as much leeway. We listed some schools that are listed on the slide, as you can see, in which we have known that there have been some support systems of support for undocumented students. We have Loyola, we have the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and I can speak for my own experience within the UC system. I used to work as a coordinator for undocumented students, and really across the UC system, they're really trying to build support for undocumented students at the graduate level, but it's still something that's in the process. And also the same is for Cal State's in the state of California, everyone is really trying to build support for this specific population. Can we go to the next
Okay,
slide?
thank you, Martha. So, yes, thank you so much. And let's hear a little bit from our panelists on tell us please how you chose the graduate school that you're attending. And as you answer that question, go ahead and introduce yourselves. So why don't we start with you, Yvonne? Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Yvonne Beltran, and I'm a second-year medical student at the Stritch School of Medicine, Loyola University, Chicago. It's been a great 2 years. This year is the hardest, so studying a lot. But so I chose Stritch to apply to Stritch as I knew that their background in being allies with DACA students was a big deal. They were the first medical school to accept DACA students back in 2014. When I spoke to the school, when I was looking to apply to them, I knew that they were very informed about our challenges as DACA recipients and all the different kind of factors that come into, being undocumented or just having a DACA status. So anytime I had questions in the application process, Loyola was very helpful in informing me for every part of the process. I ended up applying to 30 schools, both MD and DO, choosing ones that were really considering DACA, because there is a list of schools out there that say that they consider DACA students, but that does not always mean that that could be a good school to apply to. I would call some schools and they'd say that they would view the DACA students as international students, but in the last 10 years, they hadn't accepted any international students. So there was a time where you had to choose where I was going to put my resources, what schools would make more sense. I ended up choosing 30 schools all around the country. And being originally from Georgia, which is where I went to undergrad, there's not the only school in Georgia, medical school right now accepting DACA students is Emory. But because of their credentials and grades, I knew that I probably wasn't going to get in there. So I decided to look out of state. I found that a lot of the schools that were supportive were the private ones, and also because of the funding, just like Martha had spoken about. But at the end, I decided to pick the schools that would make more sense with the grades and the mission statements I was looking for and the MCAT score that I would fit in best. And when I came to Stritch to interview, I felt a sense of community. Everybody was kind. Everybody seemed to be happy. I also was able to connect to the DACA students or some DACA students that were already enrolled. And that was very helpful to know what the atmosphere was like, to know if they were happy, because most of them, or some of them at least, had moved away from their home. And being that I was going to move away from a far place, I wanted to make sure I was going to find another place where I could call home. So I definitely ended up choosing Stritch, but I did interview at another school, Albert Einstein College of Medicine. People there were very kind and helpful, and I also got to meet DACA students there. But I think at the end of the day, I made the right choice coming to Stritch as I found a home and a sense of community and support.
Thank you, Yvonne. And why don't we turn it over to Patricia now?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Brittish Lacunae, and I'm currently at Western University of Health Sciences Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences pursuing a master's degree. So this is a special master's degree. It's umbrellaed under post-baccalaureate program. So I am an unconventional candidate for medical school, which is my ultimate goal. And so it's been a little bit of time since I graduated from my undergrad institution, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And so this is a very, very great stepping stone heading into the right direction towards professional school. The reason why I picked Western University, I can kind of echo what Yvonne said. You really want to do your homework. You want to reach out you want to make a list of schools. You can, research online what schools are available. There are schools that have homepages that do specifically mention DACA. There are also schools that don't. Now, if you want to go to a school and they don't mention DACA as a category of students that they're accepting, there's definitely international students that they mention. And if you research more, I would say by research, I mean call these schools, call out deans, call out program managers, directors, talk to them, whether it be through a phone call or through an email, personal email. Reach out to them, talk to them, ask them specific questions so that they understand where your questions are coming from. I would say more research you've done, the more research you've done on knowing how to ask these questions with fellow undocumented students, reaching out to organizations such as TheDream.Us, you can definitely make a case for yourself. And then the next thing, so for me, Western stuck out because when I called them, when I personally talked to directors and deans, and program managers, I was very well welcomed. A lot of people, you have to start with the conversation, I'm a DACA recipient, and then there's a long pause because they just don't know what that means. From my interaction over the phone and over email with a lot of these people in power and in authority of admissions process, their answer was, oh, okay, great. We do have a few DACA students currently attending our professional schools. Another very interesting thing about Western is that there is no undergraduate institution. It's a group of 9 professional schools, including veterinary, human medicine, you name it, ophthalmology, dentistry. So 9 professional schools, including the graduate school. So that was very appealing to me, that I would get the environment that I want for myself, ultimately professionally. And so I'd be groomed for the medical school admissions process. That was another reason. And lastly, the reason was it's a private school. It's a private graduate school. Private schools generally have a larger donation pool, generally have many more outside scholarship opportunities. They also have a better access to donors who are a little bit more open-minded. You don't have to feel as though you're guarded in telling a donor that, thank you so very much for the scholarship that you donated towards. I'm a DACA student. I'm a recipient of that scholarship. So it has really helped me pay for college. So looking at those differentiation between private and state colleges, having the environment right for grooming a medical school candidate, and also state of California, who hasn't heard their grade in terms of knowing the policies, being fully well open to what the undocumented community has to offer, especially undocumented youth. So all these things kind of culminated into my decision in coming to Western University.
Thank you, Pratyushna. And Jose, could you tell us a little about your journey of choosing law school and the law school you attended?
Absolutely. Good evening, and thanks for having me. Folks, I attended Baylor Law in Baylor at the Baylor University in Waco, Texas. As many of you know, that's a 3-year program, and it was in a small town called Waco, Texas, about 400,000 people. And it was about an hour and a half from the major cities, including Austin and Dallas. They didn't really have a policy in place regarding immigrant students, so I kind of had to craft that and educate them throughout the process. I ended up going there because honestly, for me, the number one factor as to whether I'd be able to attend law school was cost. I did not have the money to go. And I chose Waco, Texas because it had a very, very low cost of living, some of the cheapest in the nation. The school itself offered generous financial aid in the form of a full tuition scholarship. And Baylor itself was also a private school. I had actually gone to Arizona State University, a public school for undergrad in Arizona, when they passed Proposition 300, which took away scholarships from undocumented immigrants and made them pay out-of-state tuition. And so I didn't want that to happen again in the middle of law school like it had in undergrad. And throughout that process, I basically applied to as many law schools as I could. I applied to over 40 law schools, emailed the admissions departments of nearly every single law school in the nation for a fee waiver because applications are expensive. And the thing you'll find about the law school is the common application used to apply to law school actually makes it pretty easy to apply to a lot of different programs. At the end of the day, it was a trade-off. I went to a school where it was a little bit lonely, culturally alienating, and away from friends and family in a place that, didn't really have a lot going on. But I was able to go to law school, and I was able to do it in such a manner where I could afford it. And those 3 years were certainly worth it if you think about it as a sort of boot camp where you're investing in your future now in the hopes of having a better life down the road. So I and as many others on this call, did the calculus, did the equation, happiness versus going to a school that maybe offers more financial aid. And at the end of the day, I'm really glad that I was able to adopt those strategies because it made it so I could go to law school having, next to no money. So I'll turn it over back to the moderator.
Thank you, Jose. And Emmeline, please, your turn. Take over the microphone.
Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing good. My name's Emily Hernandez, and I'm currently a graduate student at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. So all the way down in South Texas. My graduate degree will be on mechanical engineering, and the way I chose the school was, that's where I did my undergraduate. So I already felt pretty comfortable with the environment there, especially with the program because right there at UTRGV, there's a lot of opportunities for you to research with any professor, and there's also a lot of resources basically for financial aid and what they usually call assistantships. Assistantships at that school, all basically you have to do is network and also get to know your professors. That way you know who might be looking for someone, let's say for a teacher's assistant or anything like that. And with those kind of deals for the assistantships, what they do is you either do a teacher's assistant or maybe you're a research candidate with a certain professor. And what they would do is they'll usually pay for your school and they'll also give you stipend money each month. So, that was one of the biggies. And also, I decided to stay in UTRGB because, like I said, the environment there's pretty good. The networking opportunities are also very good. I know the engineering department there is very thorough, and they're always bringing down engineering companies, or they even have, like we're gonna talk about later on in the panel, travel grants, and those travel grants actually help the engineering students because most of the students there at UTRGB, if they don't get hired from those companies they bring down to the school, they do get hired. And like at least a 70% success rate of getting hired at conferences that happen all over the country. So staying somewhere where it's cheap and also where I already feel comfortable, that was my main choice of staying at the undergraduate school I went to.
Thank you, Emmeline, and thank you everyone for sharing your experience with that. Let's open it up for a few questions. So Donna, can you tell us if anybody has a raised hand or any questions that have come through the question box?
Okay, we don't have any questions through the box yet, and we also don't have any raised hands yet.
Okay, well then we will keep going. As you guys think of questions, please put them in the question box, and the next time that we have time for questions, you can either raise your hand or we'll call on the question that you put in your box. So let's move on to the role of advisor. So Martha, back to you.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about the role of advisors is because unlike undergraduate, graduate school is really about grooming, being groomed into a professional. And I think it's very important to talk about the role of advisors and also thinking about advisors as you make your decision into applying to different programs. Can we go? Thank you. So yeah, as I already mentioned, unlike undergraduate, advisors are very important. Essentially, they're the ones that help you academically. They provide the academic mentorship, whether it's through research, whether you work for them, whether you work as their research assistants or you're their teacher assistants. And ultimately, you are trying to establish, in many programs, you're essentially trying to establish a relationship with them, particularly in PhD programs and also for master programs. Like they can also be kind of like a springboard that can help you write some of your letters of recommendation if you want to pursue into a PhD program. Students who do not have a very good relationship with their advisors, it might take them a little bit longer to finish, because in graduate school you really need someone to support you there, to support you academically, and to really be an advocate for you within your department. I always encourage students to really make sure that you know what advisors you might potentially be working with once you apply to graduate programs, because they're definitely going to make a difference. As I mentioned before, you definitely want to contact them, try to know if they're taking in any students. Let them know that you're interested in working with them, and because essentially they can also leverage their own position within the program to determine whether you're accepted into the program or not. Can we go to the next slide? Once you're in graduate school, you really want to establish like a good relationship with your advisor. In many, the relationships are going to differ depending on the different fields that you're in. So for example, in some of the humanities, you may not be doing like research directly with them, but then you might also be doing other type of work with them, and that's really going to allow you to develop as a professional. Can we go to the next slide? And then you might be wondering, well, how am I going to know what are some good advisors for me to look into? You definitely want to make sure that you're applying to programs in which you know that you are going to be working with an advisor who is active in the field, especially like if you want to do research, you really want to make sure that they're doing the cutting edge research that you want to be engaging with. You also want to make sure that most importantly, that they have a track record working with first generation, low income, and particularly undocumented students. And I cannot overemphasize how important it is to make sure that you really know someone that can advocate, that can serve as an advisor for you. In my own experience, you actually in your own application, like you may even want to mention some of the faculty that you plan to work with if you're accepted into the program. And I just cannot emphasize how important these relationships are with your advisor. My advisor, she has been great and has been supportive and really supportive in the type of work that I want to engage in as I continue my studies. Can we go to the next slide? In order to compile your list, some of folks have already mentioned how they applied over to 30, over 40 schools. You really want to make sure that you have done your research and you begin your research way in advance. You definitely do not want to leave your graduate school application within a month or 2 months before it's due. If you're an undergrad and if you're thinking about applying to graduate school right after you graduate, you really want to be doing some of the research by your junior year. In order to compile your list of programs and compile the list of potential advisors that you want to work with, you want to leverage on the networks that you have as an undergraduate. So for example, asking your current undergraduate professors for the names of people in your field. Also reach out to TAs. They can also be a good, they can provide excellent advice. And leverage your professors. They can also introduce you to other people that you're interested in working in graduate school. And also reach out, whether it's through department websites, also maybe potentially ask, getting their contact information and just emailing them and making sure that they know your name even before you apply to the graduate program. It's very important. Can we go to the next slide? When reaching out to advisors, to potential advisors, make sure that you are intentional once you contact them. When I mean with intentional, like you may want to articulate in a way that you are interested in applying to the graduate program. Let them know whether your research aligns with their research, which is really important. You want to make sure that your research really aligns with the kind of work that they're interested in. If you're an undergraduate, you can potentially take independent studies with one of the professors that you hope to apply once in graduate school. But I always encourage to reach out far in advance. Make sure that you present yourself in a very professional manner. You want to use spell check, ask your peers to review the email before you send out the email to reaching out to the professors. And you really want to make sure that at all times you're very professional and you're very curious. I have heard from some faculty that they don't answer their emails to students who are interested in applying to the graduate program. I actually heard a professor who said that he did not answer his email until the student reached out 3 times. So if you don't hear back from a potential advisor, do not panic. You may want to give it another try, but if you don't hear back from after you have attempted to reach out to the professor 4 or 5 times, then you may want to move on. But you want to be persistent enough where you get an answer, but you don't want to wait there for months waiting for a response. So you really want to be intentional, be professional when you do reach out, and really do your homework far in advance before you even reach out. Can we go to the next slide? You really familiarize with your list, really be intentional of the people, of the potential advisors that you want to work with as you think about applying to graduate school. And I cannot overemphasize, you really want to reach out. You want to make sure that there's at least 2 professors that you're really interested in their work and that you want to make the commitment going to that graduate program. You don't only want to rely on one potential advisor if you make the commitment of going to a graduate program, because they might leave once you actually commit and go to the school, and then you might realize that no other faculty are actually doing the kind of work that you want to be engaging with. So make sure that once you do select the programs that you want to apply, make sure that there's multiple faculty who are really doing the kind of work and who might be supportive of your academic endeavors. Can we go to the next slide? Last word of advice, please reach out to potential advisors. Ideally, it would be great if you could meet them face-to-face before you even apply to graduate school, but that doesn't always happen. And really try to present yourself in a professional manner. I cannot overemphasize that because now you're a graduate school, and it's also not only your academics, how you do in your academically, but also how professional you present yourself to other people. So really practice how you're going to reach out and make sure that you do your homework beforehand. Can we go to the next slide?
Okay, so before we go into questions, I know that for the role of an advisor is perhaps a little different if you're going to a professional school like a medical school or law school. So Yvonne, I know you might want to say a few words on how how different the role of an advisor might be in medical school. So please go ahead.
Yes. So as far as undergrad, well, you do not go into the process of finding an advisor from the med school you're interested into applying. You are more than welcome to reach out to the schools and the admissions counselors and email them questions. Again, like Martha said, you might not hear back from them, and you can try emailing them again. Sometimes, depending on the application cycle, you might not hear back, though. As an undergrad, though, you do want to build relationships with your professors, research mentors, advisors, and pre-med committees and pre-med advisors, because you will eventually need a letter of recommendation from 2 science professors, 1 non-science professor, or maybe like a pre-med faculty if they have it at your undergrad. You also want to make sure you are making connections with your personal life contacts, such as employers, doctors you've shadowed, volunteer contacts, maybe like a volunteer supervisor, so that you make sure that when it's time to apply to medical school, you will be able to ask people to write you letters of recommendation. for the programs. And one more thing I just wanted to state, because I was not aware of this before, like well in advance, is that you apply to medical school a year prior to the year you enroll. So application process opens up in June, which is the main like one application called the AMCUS application, or the AACOMAS for DO schools. It opens up around June, and then it closes around October, October time. And then that would be like, it started this June, and those people that apply would be applying for the next class for next year. So it's just something to keep in mind, that you want to make sure that you apply early on and that you're starting to round everything up for the application.
Thank you, Yvonne. Jose, I don't know if you have any words regarding the role of advisors at law school and how it might be different, but if you do, feel free to share right now.
So in the context of advisors in law school, what I would recommend is because law school is very general and people don't really specialize in a specific field, when you get a sense of what you want to do and what field you want to practice in, to build relationships with the professors who do specialize in those fields in order to start making those connections now. So even though you can't major or focus in law school, the relationships you build with law professors in those areas, who can be de facto advisors, are incredibly valuable for your career moving forward.
Thank you, Jose. Any other questions that have come in, Sadhana, at this
Yes,
point?
we have a few questions come in. This one is for Jose. Are there more DACA students at the law school you went to in Waco, Texas now?
You know, I don't know for sure, but it's my sense that there is not. There were very few minorities at that law school, including very few immigrants. Excuse me.
Jose, how long ago did you go to Baylor? And sorry, okay. If you can, I don't know if you could tell us how long ago you went to Baylor, and if you still have any contacts of professors there.
Yes, I still have contacts with lots of folks that are at Baylor, including professors that helped a lot while I was there. In fact, several years after I left, they actually started their own DACA clinic, where they were helping DACA recipients apply for DACA in the nearby community. So I think it's grown a little bit more supportive. I was there about, I would say, 7 years ago, and I'm more than happy to help connect people too if they're interested in attending.
Great. So everybody know that at the end, we will give you the email addresses of all the panelists so that you can reach out to them, and they have graciously offered to respond to your questions when you reach out. Another question, Sadhana?
Yes, so we have a question for Yvonne. I'm just going to read it as written. I'm currently a junior on a pre-med track and was wondering what part of your application helps you get into Stritch. Aside from meeting the basic requirements, is there something that made you stand out?
I think that's a little hard to say, just because I'm not sure what the admissions counselors were thinking. I know that I applied 2 times, and the first time around I had applied a little bit later in the cycle, and that gave me a disadvantage, so that's why I did not get in. And Stritch, which they do this, but many schools do not, is if you apply the first time and don't get in, you can talk to them to give you feedback to strengthen your application the second time. And they told me that they really liked reading my personal statement and all my essays. So I think my essays definitely stood out to them. I don't know if people are aware, there's a primary application and then a secondary application process for med school. And the primary has your personal statement. The secondary has each individual question, like school questions where you answer. And I think their writing about my DACA status and how I built resilience with that stood out. Just personalizing it with my own stories and everything I've learned through my life, I think stood it out. And then also just contacting the school a lot to let them know that they would be my first choice, and that I really was happy to interview there. And then maybe those things where it would help me.
Thank you. Another question, Sadhana?
Okay, another question we have is what are some great medical schools to look at in California?
Practitioner, that since you are probably in that process, do you have any suggestions in that?
Yeah, I can add to that. I think what's important is to kind of do your homework again, to look at what you are interested in. Medicine is manyfold, but I think two general categories that we can kind of decide from is if you are interested in clinical side of things or if you're interested in research side of things. Many schools are research focused. They look at what kind of research background do you have you published. Publishing is great. If you publish in a scientific article or a journal, it can add so much to your application. But if you're in clinical side of things, I personally being a unconventional applicant, I've had 4 years between finishing my undergrad and starting my master's post-baccalaureate program. And then adding more time to finally be a med school applicant. But it really matters what you do and how you invest your time and what you do in your time. So for me, I had to sort of, we're talking about the timeline of things. Back when I graduated from my undergrad or even my high school, I wasn't quite sure. I graduated high school pre-DACA, pre-Maryland State DREAM Act. So there were really no resources in place in Maryland. And so I had to kind of just do my homework as I went through the process. And so when I graduated, I really had to answer that question for myself. Many people apply for like gap year jobs to named agencies like FDA, and NIH. All of those resources weren't available to me because they're government agencies. And so I really had to kind of make my way, answer my own questions, and then see what was available for me. I decided to take the path of doing vocational training as a certified nursing assistant and then as a patient care technician that allowed me to take advantage of skilled working. So I worked at Johns Hopkins Hospital for 3+ years. I got to interact with mentors, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, see different sides of medicine, be able to actually take care of patients that will speak volumes on my application to medical school. So it's really important, regardless of what your status is, how deferred you are, whether it be TPS or DACA. One thing that you can really hone into is taking advantage of the time you have, and picking and choosing, though our scope of opportunities are not very big as other people's are. Still, we can be selective. We can pick out what we spend our time on, and then really take advantage of all the people that are there. Network, again, be professional, and have an end goal in mind. Why are you harboring all these relationships with mentors? What do you want to kind of learn from them? And then when time's comfortable, when you feel comfortable, when you feel like there is some tangible relationship between a mentor and yourself, then you can go into detail about what your journey has been like and why you want to do what you want to do. So I think that's really important to kind of separate clinical from research and then kind of go from there.
And the question was, are there any particular medical schools that you're looking in California? Or Yvonne, do you know of any medical schools in California that you would recommend?
Well, I do know that the UCLA does accept DACA students. Some of the UC schools consider DACA students. UCSF does. There's some students that are know there. I will say there is some resources at the end that will provide the schools, but also keep in mind that California schools are very competitive because there's not that many for the state in its size.
All right, thank you. A couple more questions, Adana.
Okay, I'm going to read another scholar's question. She says, I'm currently an opportunity scholar at Delaware State University. I'm interested in an MFA program at Arizona State University. I wonder if there's any feedback in regards to the acceptance of DACA recipients in that school and what type of financial help might be available.
Hmm. I don't know if anyone in the panelists could answer that, but you should know that unfortunately last year the state um, passed a law that took away in-state tuition fees for Arizona students to go to college in Arizona. So I don't know what state you're in. I know you're at Delaware right now, but if you regardless, right? If you're out of state, you would have to pay out of state fees anyway. But on the other hand, ASU is a partner college of TheDream.Us, so we might be able to at least connect you with our scholar advisor at ASU and see if the scholar advisor can direct you or help you answer your question. So you could email me or Sadana, and we can see if we can put you in touch with the ASU um, team that we know there. Jose, you're from went to ASU. Do you have any insight on that, or you've just been away for too long now?
I think it's been a while, so I'll defer to the other panelists.
Okay. All right. Let's take another question. One more, Sadana, and then we'll move on.
Okay, this is a question for all the panelists. How did you prepare academically and financially during your undergraduate years for graduate school?
Anyone on the panel like to take that on?
Hi, folks. This is Jose Magaña. I'll just give my quick 2 cents. First, obviously, saving money when you can. The thing about coming from a lower socioeconomic background is I never learned how to budget because I never had money to spend, so there was nothing to budget. And I kind of kept that mantra when I did start doing a little bit better in law school. So I kept living like a student in law school. Even to the point where, even if I had a little bit more money because of my side jobs, all of that went into the bank. So I think just being really, really good at developing the skills to manage your money is very important, because for us, we never know when unexpected things will arise, unexpected medical emergency, things of that nature. So just developing the skills to be as frugal as possible.
Anyone would like to address the how do you prepare yourself academically to be ready for law school?
I guess I can say something as being ready for medical school. I think just before to applying to medical school, you're taking the MCAT, so and all the classes that you're required to take. So I think those sufficiently take care of it. I would definitely just make sure that you're learning and absorbing as much as you can from those classes, and that you're learning to balance life and school, because it just gets busier and it just gets more of a workload. So you're having to figure out how to balance life and work at the same time. And to echo what the other panelists said is I worked through all of my undergrad years. I worked full time and was a student as full time as I could be. And I would save money and do that just because that was the best way to, it really pays off to save money and have some in your graduate years, especially in medical school, because you're not able to work.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's move on to talk about funding. It's a good segue to funding. So Martha, back to you.
Thank you. So, in thinking about how to fund graduate school, that's one of the biggest concerns that I always come across with speaking with students. Unlike undergraduate, when you're thinking about applying to graduate school, there's this something called, I didn't know when I was applying to graduate school until I actually applied to graduate school. There's something called fellowships, which is a fancier word of actually saying scholarships, but basically they're pretty much the same thing. But unlike undergraduate, graduate school is very decentralized, meaning that there's really no one office that can answer all of your financial questions when you're admitted to the program, unlike undergraduate. So when you apply to graduate school, when you're undocumented, you have to really apply to different multiple fellowships whether they're internal, meaning that they're coming from the institution, or external. So for example, I'm currently attending UC Berkeley. So in my particular case, I did get a fellowship that comes internally from UC Berkeley, but you definitely want to apply when you're applying to graduate school. You want to make sure that you're also applying to fellowships, whether that's external. So let's say that I got a fellowship from PD Soros, and that's gonna cover some of my financial costs. So you want to be start learning, familiarizing yourself with internal fellowships that are provided through the institution in which you're going to apply to graduate school, but also thinking about like what are some of the external fellowships that do accept undocumented students. There's also something else called departmental funding. So in some cases, your department may provide a fellowship instead of graduate division. So in my case, the fellowship that I was awarded to, the first 2 years comes from graduate division, but then the last 2 years of the fellowship comes from my specific department, which is the Department of Education. So there's distinctions between whether it's coming from your immediate department, whether it's law school or your different departments, or whether it's coming from graduate division. You also want to apply to other fellowships, other scholarships that are available for undergraduates. You're going to start to notice that when you look at the requirements, some of them do accept graduate students, even though they mainly target undergraduates. So also be lookout for those types of scholarships. Also fundraising on your own. I personally did a lot of fundraising as an undergraduate before the California Dream Act. So also thinking of doing that once you're in graduate school. There are some funds, private loans that you can tap into. I would highly encourage all of you to really do your homework and think about what are some of the fellowships that you can apply to before tapping into private loans. In some cases, you might be eligible for state financial aid, and that might be, for example, in the state of California, if you're a master's student, if you are attending graduate school at a California State University, a CSU, you are provided some limited financial aid through the California Dream Act. But if you apply to a UC, you're not eligible to receive state aid. So really make sure that you are being intentional, not only thinking about the programs that you're applying to, the advisors, the role of advisors, but also what are some of the potential aid that I can tap into if I go into these schools. Can we go to the next slide? I cannot overemphasize, as some of our panelists have already mentioned, they apply to over 30 schools. You also want to make sure that you are applying to fellowships at the same time as you're applying to graduate school. One thing that I didn't know, and it was until this amazing program, they mentioned how for some institutions, you're awarded fellowships based on a number of things, but you don't necessarily apply to them. In my case is a good example. I did not apply to the fellowship that I got through Berkeley. I was when I was accepted, shortly after, about a month after, I was notified that I had been granted a fellowship. So in some institutions, you might become eligible for these fellowships, but for some, you have to directly apply to them. I can't overemphasize how important it is to making sure that you're applying to a wide range of fellowships, and some institutions are going to allow you to apply as you're applying to graduate school. You want to make sure that you're applying internally. So look at the financial aid website of some of the institutions. I can only speak of California. So for example, California, they will mention like, oh, these fellowships. So for example, UCLA or other UCs, or like these fellowships are open also to AB 540 students who might be undocumented. So make sure you look at the financial aid website from the schools, but you also want to look at some of external private fellowships. Can we go into the other slide? And once you do get the fellowship, I hope you all do get fellowships because they're very important in graduate school. You want to make sure that you continue to be in good academic standing. Some fellowships are going to require you to maintain a certain GPA. And some of them, they are going to prevent you from, they might say like you're not allowed to work. And these are very highly competitive fellowships in which they're providing you the money so that you can really focus in your academics. For some, they are going to say that they have tuition remission, meaning for some of them that they might cover either your full tuition or partial tuition. Some of them may actually even provide a stipend for you to live on after they have paid for your tuition. So you want to really make sure that you understand what are some of the requirements and some of the agreements that you're making upon deciding to take on this fellowship. Can we go to the next slide? These are some of the fellowships that we know of. And of course, you definitely want to look into, these are just search engines and they're not by any means comprehensive. The ones with the little asterisks, we know that they have accepted undocumented students in the past. And I really highly encourage you. So for health, we have, for example, the Pre-Health Dreamers Fellowship list. So you can look into that, and that can be a starting point. They direct you to different websites and where you might find more information about certain type of fellowships that are available for undocumented students. I always encourage students to apply to the Paul and Daisy Soto's Fellowship. It's a really juicy, very juicy, competitive fellowship. It's available for undocumented students, and I believe it's multi-year, so meaning that they give you the money multiple years. I believe it's over like 40 grand, so it's a very good fellowship, very generous. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes, I will. And just a reminder to everybody that you can download this PowerPoint from the handout section of your control panel. And when you download the PDF of this PowerPoint, you'll have all the links to these external fellowships, and any other link that we're providing in the PowerPoint, you'll have it in the handout.
Yeah, so as some of you all mentioned at the beginning of the PowerPoint presentation, many of you, the vast majority of you, are thinking about going into master programs, which is great. And one of the things that I like to highlight to students is that unfortunately there is a little bit of less funding provided to master students and professional students. You might actually receive more funding for PhD programs for various reasons. But with that being said, I always encourage students to apply to both masters and PhDs and professional schools if possible. But one of the things that I really want to get across is do not be afraid to negotiate your funding package. You really want to be intentional and really leverage the academic background that you're bringing into this program, because essentially they accepted you for a reason. So you want to make sure that you leverage that. So one of the ways in which you can negotiate your funding packet is really one of the things that you can do is maybe writing a letter to your specific department. So you will not necessarily be communicating with a graduate division within the school that you're applying to, but reaching out to the specific department and trying to negotiate your funding package. If you, for example, in some of the things that you would want to communicate, financial aid situation has changed since you last applied to the program. If you can disclose information that you probably didn't disclose during your application process, that can also be another strategy that you can use. And if you got into other graduate programs, you can also use that. Let them know that you got accepted to other graduate programs and you're thinking about that you really want to make sure that you're making a well-informed financial decision as you're thinking about making a commitment to a graduate program. Can we go to the next slide? And we once you have started your financial aid program, your graduate program, once you're there, let's say that you didn't get any fellowships before you made the commitment. That does not mean that you should not continue to apply to different fellowships. So there's specifically for PhD, for people who are going to be there for 5, 6, 7 years in the graduate program, there's also different fellowships that you can continue to apply once you're actually into the program. So pre-doctoral dissertation once you're actually writing, and then also after you graduate and you get a PhD, in the case of you getting a PhD, there's also fellowships that you apply after you have your PhD, and that can be a source of revenue for you. And now I'm actually going to turn it to Pratyushna, who has done a lot of fundraising on her own, and she's actually going to be providing all of you with some tips.
So hi, everybody. Yeah, so I was able to successfully fundraise for to matriculate into graduate school. My background is a little bit different. I was my family's primary breadwinner before starting school this fall full time. And these post-baccalaureate science, hard rigor courses also don't allow you to work while you're in these courses, because they're geared towards just grooming you professionally and academically to get you into professional schools. So I was aware of that. I was aware that I won't be able to work, and so my intention first was to just get into a program. Of course, get into a program that I am particularly looking support from, and so Western fit that bracket for me. And so once I was accepted, the challenge was to finance my education. So my goal coming into graduate school the first year was that I did not want to take out any private loans. And here's the reason for that, because my long-term goal is to continue to professional schools, and private loans from institutions have a cap for them, and those caps are already very limiting in terms of accessing those loans for professional schools. I didn't want to take up that opportunity as my first opportunity to take up any loans. I certainly didn't want to get to professional schools with already thousands of dollars in loans from graduate school. So I had to be creative, and I had to think outside the box. Quite literally, I had to kind of break down the box and reassemble it. So the reason why it's so important to keep your mentors so close to you and informed as to what you're doing professionally is for this reason. Many a times you'll be able to contact your professors, your mentors, your allies, your supporters, and explain them your situation. And many a times I found that throughout my undergraduate experience, I was able to, though I wasn't able to start graduate school right after undergrad, I was able to keep those experiences very close. A lot of my mentors, well, a few of them, at least 3 or 4 of them from undergrad and also from professional background, were with me throughout the journey. They understood my challenges. They understood what I was doing, why I was doing it. And so when time came after being accepted, I reached out to them. I started a GoFundMe page, and I was able to successfully raise about $13,000, which was good enough to start at least without the worry of how am I going to get through the first semester. And so the things you want to take into account is not just your tuition, but you also want to take into account your miscellaneous expenses. And for me, those things included like the enrollment fee. I was moving out of state for the very first time for school from Maryland to California. I was working, but all the money that I was making was supposed to be for my family for a rainy day. So I was saving for them, right? So how was I gonna, commute from Maryland to California? How was that gonna happen? So airfare was another miscellaneous expense that I had to care for. Enrollment fee I mentioned, airfare, and then stuff like parking permit. Moving to a new place for the first time, you want to be safe. You want to consider that. Well, when you pick a school, what area are you going to? How are you going to live? Living expenses, that's another one. And then, of course, the tuition. And so I really thought about, we're going to talk about personal statement, but I also really thought about how do I want to ask for money? Many of us as first generation graduate students or undergrad students, we are very, very coy about asking for money, whether it be from professional institutions or, from our community. And it comes off as though it's belittling yourself, but I didn't want to feel that way. So I made a very, very professional sounding letter of ask, and I had peers, mentors objectively review it and asked for feedback. And before I put myself out there, I made sure everybody looked at it, people I trusted, a very close inner circle I trusted, and asked them for an objective peer review. After that, I went ahead and I put up my GoFundMe page, and I was able to, then again, you ask your aunt, your uncle, whether it be birthday money, Christmas money, New Year's happiness that they want to endow on you 6 months early, or anything else, any kind of fund that you're receiving, to please go ahead and contribute towards my graduate school or professional school fund. And then for my close inner circle to then reach out to 50 other people that they knew, that makes up about 400 other people that contributed to this pool. And that's how I was able to raise the money I was able to raise. It took care of all the miscellaneous. It took care for the first semester of school this fall. And then I was able to make a plea to my department. We were talking about department funding. And I got a substantial scholarship, considering my academic standing at the time, a substantial scholarship. So I'm able to cover first full year of graduate school without any private loans or any other loans. So going in with a goal, having a plan to execute it, and then finally reaping the benefits. So here I am without a penny in loans for the first year of graduate school. So I'm okay for so far. So I want you all also to think about it, maybe take some time and really strategize and plan how that can be an option for you as well. I'm going to turn it over to Jose.
Thank you so much. Folks, I'm going to talk a little bit about funding for law school specific strategies. It's a little bit more unique. There are some similarities, but a lot of differences. So we're going to start off at the top. Law schools have a lot of scholarships known as institutional scholarships. These are just scholarships that the law school gives to people who apply to go to that school, often anywhere from partial to full tuition. And oftentimes there's not a separate application process. These law schools will just look at your application and look at your LSAT score and then say, hey, we're going to give you this partial or full scholarship, which leads me into the second thing. For law school, the most important thing that determines the amount of financial aid is your LSAT score. So it's really, really important that if you're planning on going to law school, that you dedicate the time necessary to get a decent LSAT score. Some of the lower tiered law schools will start giving full scholarships at around the low 160s. The highest score you can get is about 180. And the way I tell people is, if you could work, full time for 3 months and get paid $100,000, would you do that? Well, that's what studying for the LSAT is. You put in 3 months of hard work, and then you end up getting your entire law school education for free. So I really can't emphasize the importance of the LSAT score enough. The other thing I want to encourage you all to think about is that for law school, at least, there are rankings. Some of the lower ranked schools offer more financial aid because they need to in order to attract more students. And so what may be important is to apply to a diversity of different law schools, everything from schools in maybe less geographically desirable areas, such as Waco, Texas, or maybe schools that are kind of mid or lower tiered, in addition to your aspirational goals, because that way you will get a wide variety of schools, and some may offer you a full scholarship that you wouldn't think of to apply. For applying to multiple institutions, it's very, very helpful. Again, I applied to 40. There are fee waivers you can get in different processes, so you're not drowning in application fees, and I strongly encourage you to all look at that. That can be anything from just emailing the school and being like, I want to apply, can I have a fee waiver, which works for me for 40 law schools, to a process that the LSAC has for fee waivers. And then for folks that want to do a kind of public interest internships during the summers, law schools offer different stipends for public interest work, and that's public interest work for nonprofit organizations that are kind of engaging in legal service or advocacy on behalf of vulnerable populations. So there's lots of different funding opportunities once you get into law school when it comes to your internships and building up your foundation for your career. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Yvonne. She's going to talk a little bit about being a med student at the University of Loyola, including some tips and tricks for being able to attend med school. Yvonne?
Thank you. So each school is very different in how they fund or how they help fund DACA students. Some of the similar tips that the other panelists gave on law school kind of also is the same thing for medical school. Getting a good MCAT score and showing that you're a good eligible student can provide some of the institutional scholarships that are available. Loyola also has the scholarships, the institutional scholarships. However, DACA students are not eligible for those institutional scholarships, so it depends on the institution itself what scholarships are available for the DACA students. And there's also external scholarships, which I know Martha talked about, which are very helpful. As far as Loyola University and how I funded my school is that there's entities that have a relationship with Loyola that have offered funds to make loans for the students. And these funds are usually for the underserved community. So these entities see these to make these loans as an investment for the communities because they know that ultimately us DACA students are very passionate about giving back. And so they feel like they are still giving back and investing this money in the place where they want to. Every year, each partnership varies. And I obtained funding through Trinity Health, and it covers only my tuition and fees, and it is a loan. And they try to do their best to make it as close as to a federal loan as possible. As far as personal and like my own miscellaneous funding needed, I have been able to cover that myself with personal funds that I had. It's from savings, family, so else. Otherwise, I would have probably gone through a private loan through a bank. So in medical school, it's not very uncommon to use private loans because there's the thing where it takes a lot to apply to scholarships and people might run out of time, or as we said, some people don't like to ask for money and it's hard to ask. And sometimes it's just hard to find a loan or a private loan like an institutional loan or institutional scholarship. So a private loan through a bank is, even though it's not ideal, it tends to be a portion as how medical students fund their student loans and their student fees. So I do know of one of the students in my program that was able to apply for a Discover loan, and she was not required to get a co-signer. Later on, we'll talk a little bit more about private loans. And I spoke to her about it, and she did say at the time they didn't ask for a co-signer, and she does not know if anything changed. I looked up on the Discover website, and it does say that you are required to have a co-signer, but it is something to think about, that you should be cleaning up your credit, making sure that you are budgeting, making sure that, financially you are in the right foot in case you need to ask for a private loan through a bank. But yeah.
Yvonne, do you want to tell them a little bit about those two resources?
Yes. Sorry. So these two resources I've put on there because they have been great. They were great resources for me during my application process. And I know Patricia, she's also used PhD, which is Pre-Health Dreamers. They're a group of students that started this organization because they also want to go to med school, and they were like the trailblazers. I don't know if any of you have heard of Denise Rojas or and I can't remember his last name, but they were people that started this because they knew they wanted to set the path for other medical inspiring students, and they themselves wanted to go to medical school. So it's a platform for undocumented and DACA students where they can obtain resources such as like list of scholarships for the year, what schools to apply to. It's a form of connection with other students. And it also connects you to even admissions counselors such as Sunny Nakai, Dean Nakai at my school, to be able to like get informed about the process and stuff. So I highly recommend anybody that's wanting to apply to med school to connect with pre-health dreamers, email them. They also have every year they have the peer enrichment and engagement program, which they call it PEEP for short. And actually 2 of us have done their program. And it was a series of webinars that talked about how to become a competitive applicant. And at the end, we met up for a retreat. It was a very valuable experience. We practiced interviewing. It just prepared us for the whole application process, how to write a personal statement, how to present yourself when you're asking for money, all the very important things you need to know for medical school. So I highly recommend. And then mementor.org is another great resource that I found, and it's like a platform to connect students with mentors. So people on there, you go on there, you create a profile, and there's doctors, there's pre-health students, there's medical students that have profiles on there, and it just gives a platform so you can connect to other people. And everybody that creates a profile there, they want to be like contacted. And there's also things like a news feed, almost like a Facebook news feed that gives articles or maybe good information out there that the people that run this manage. You can also download the app, which I have. And so also if you'd like to connect through there, it's a great organization, but it just gives you like an on-pocket to go mentor resource, which is great.
Great. Thank you, Yvonne.
Yeah. Now I'm turning it back to Martha, correct?
Yes. Martha?
Yes. So thank you all. In this slide, you can also see other blogs that are supportive of undocumented students and that also have direct links to scholarships, such as Immigrants Rising. It's a it's a nonprofit based in California, but they also have a lot of resources both for students in California, but also out of state. My Undocumented Life, they also launched pretty recently a series of blogs in which students, current undocumented graduate students, share their own experiences, but they also have links to scholarships. We also have like another link which you'll be able to tap into for MBA programs for Masters in Business Administration. So if you're interested, please do reach out to them. And then also we have another link for the GRE. So you really have to make sure that you do budget. Unfortunately, you do have to pay for some of these exams, but there are some resources that you should tap into so that you don't have to pay when thinking about applying to graduate school. And as already mentioned, there are private loans that are available for undocumented folks. Try, if possible, having that as your last resource, and really being intentional in terms of like doing your homework far in advance of the scholarships and fellowships that you're going to be applying to. But also, private loans are available. Some of them do have high interest rates, so make sure that you also consult with someone in terms of your finances, in terms of like the particular loans that you're thinking of. Some of the jargon that they use can be confusing for many of us because we haven't tapped into some of these loans. So before you make a decision, make sure that you do reach out to folks that can inform you about the private loans. Can we go to the next slide?
Sure, we're going to take some time for questions, but before we do that, Emmeline, could you tell us a little bit about how you are funding your school? And since you are also one of the bloggers for the docu-series In My Undocumented Life, maybe you can tell a little bit more about that series and what you wrote about and how you're funding your school.
Hi again, everyone. So right now I am not going full-time to school. I'm going part-time and I'm also working. So the way I'm funding my school is while I work, that's where I get my payments from. So I actually got into a contract to do an installment payment for this semester. So the installment payment is broken down into 4 payments. The first payment given before school starts, and from then on, a month later, you keep on going and you give the other payments. So I am paying as I go for this semester because unfortunately I wasn't able to get an assistantship this semester. But hopefully for the next semester I'm already applying, and there's also scholarships like they mentioned that either from the school you're trying to apply to or that you want to go to. And also apart from the installment payment I'm on, I do get a little bit of financial aid, so that does take a little bit of a load off. Now for the blog, I didn't actually write most of it about graduate school. It was a reflection of my life and also of how I'm dealing with the financial situation a little bit at home, and then a little bit also from school. So there is resources out there. You just have to ask, because apart from the assistantships, which are also fellowships that my school provides, our main advisor for the mechanical engineering program does recommend us to go to certain professors that we might be willing to work with and that they're willing to work with us. And most of the times you will get paid, but there are some that really are just focusing on the research, and they don't get any grants for it. But at the end, that is also extra experience for you. So I do recommend, other than checking out to see if maybe the school provides financial aid or if there's installment plans, also check for emergency loans. Emergency loans are, in my school at least, it's a little bit similar to the installment plan, except that the emergency loan will pay for your tuition at the beginning of the school year, and then at 3/4 of the semester you do have to pay it back. So there is opportunities out there. You just have to get yourself out there and see what other opportunities you might have.
Thank you, Emily.
Sorry, if I could add just a very small comment in terms of for folks that are thinking about like TA-ships. What it is essentially you're working for the institution in which you're applying to graduate school in exchange of money. Unfortunately, it means that you're working. So one of the obstacles for many graduate students who do not qualify for DACA is that they cannot essentially be teacher assistants, because it means that you're working for the institution, and if you don't have a work permit, then that can be an impediment. However, I would really highly encourage students who, if you're like thinking about doing a PhD program, many of us, essentially you're asked to teach at some point in your graduate program. I would highly encourage you to also reach out to potential allies and explain them your situation. I have heard that if you try to attempt to be a research assistant versus a teacher assistant, there's more leeway because you're not necessarily working directly. But I would highly encourage people to really reach out to see if they can turn their TA-ships and do something else for the institution in exchange of financial support.
Okay, thank you. So Donna, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have questions. And following on from what Martha just said, there's actually a question regarding that. So someone has written that he says, I'm preparing to apply to PhD schools, both public and private, but my status is not DACA. So I have no idea if I'll be able to work as an RA or a TA. But I've heard that if I get funding as a stipend, I do not need the work authorization. Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, so I'm just it really I would highly encourage the student to reach out to either one of the panelists, but it's very difficult to give a advice without knowing more specific information. I can only speak of the UCs. So like that's one of the things that other undocumented students we have been really trying to address at Berkeley. But we haven't heard anything back because the way that that Berkeley is saying is that at the institutional level, so coming from Jenna Napolitano, who oversees the whole UC system, Berkeley is saying that they need to get a response from them in order to make these TAs available for non-DACA students. But I do know that some students who do not qualify for DACA, who are in PhD programs within the sciences, they have been able to do it, but they have been able to get funding through their advisor. So their advisor knows their situation, and their advisor has been very advocating for the students to ensure that they are getting some sort of stipend. But it's through their in conjunction with their departments and their advisors.
Another question, Sedana?
Yes, this question is for Yvonne. The scholar says, I'm a junior in the process of preparing to apply to med school. I'm drafting my personal statement and I'm wondering if I should say that I'm a DACA student. Would it hurt me more than it would help?
I think it always is going to depend on the schools you're applying to, but if you're applying to a school that is not DACA friendly and that's going to see that as a negative, then I would say that's probably not a school you want to go to anyway. My story included my DACA story, as it is just part of my life and there's nothing I can do about that. And I just wrote it in a way where it talked about resilience and adapting and all the positive things that it came with our stories. So I would suggest you put that in there if that's part of your story, if that's really what you want to, if it's really, if you feel you can't leave it out because it's going to leave out part of your life story and as to why you want to practice medicine, I would say don't leave it out and include it, and make sure that you're applying to schools that are going to support you as a DACA student.
That's a good segue to move on to talk about crafting the statement of purpose and your personal statement. So Martha, go ahead. And we only have about 5 more minutes, so let's go.
Yes, so for statement of purpose, you want to make sure that you're really crafting a statement that really speaks to your academic and professional credentials, and really make a case as to why you're ready to go to graduate school. Can we go to the next slide? There are some tips that you can utilize to make sure that you have an effective statement of purpose. You really want to make sure that you demonstrate a passion for the field that you want to pursue. You really want to make sure that you really also focus on your academic background. And there's different ways that you can address that, whether it's through publication, your own research interests, professors' classes that you have taken. And you really want to make sure that you highlight your passion for the field, but also the preparation that you have received, and also allude to the fact that you're able to work independently, because graduate school, it's really about working you independent as an independent student. Can we go to the next slide? If you're going into research programs, you really want to emphasize all of the research experience that you have acquired as an undergraduate program. If you're working, if you're trying to get into master programs that are more based on work experience, hands-on experience, you definitely want to not necessarily focus on your research, but more focus on your hands-on experience. If you're trying to focus on your research, you can draw upon theories or any relevant research that you have done, at least in the social sciences. Can we go to the next slide? Most programs are going to ask for a personal statement, with the exception of medical school, and Yvonne can provide you with more information if you reach out. But also, like, you do want to talk about like your life experience, how it has shaped who you are, but you always want to stay positive and you don't want to focus on the negative. So if you are sharing your personal story, like making sure that you end on a positive note and really highlight how it has made you a stronger, more well-rounded candidate. And this is a time for you to talk about whether you're a first generation. Some students may feel comfortable disclosing that information, and some students may not feel comfortable giving the political climate. So it's really a personal choice. And I really encourage students to really making sure that they craft a really good personal statement and utilize that and tweak it, because some of the personal statements that you're using to apply for graduate school, you can use them to apply to fellowships. Can we go to the next slide? Here are some other resources that we have already mentioned. Mi Mentor, Immigrants Rising, Pre-Health Dreamers, My Undocumented Life. There's also some resources in terms of fellowships and just blogs about how people are navigating graduate school. There's also some links to the official LSAT, the GMCAT, and so forth.
Yeah, so Khan Academy, I found that provides great preparation. And as the panelists were saying, those scores, how high they are, can influence how much money you get. So Khan Academy is a resource for that. And then I also found that there's this FACE group called UndocuGrads National Network that you can just search it in Facebook. And it's a closed group, but you can ask to be a member of it. And it's last time I saw it, it was about 600 people that are doing or pursuing grad school that are all undocumented students. And with that, we are concluding this webinar. I really, really want to thank Martha, Emmeline, Patricia, Jose, and Yvonne for sharing all their experiences and their wisdoms and their tips. I hope that this was very helpful to all of you. Again, before I close the webinar, go, if you have not downloaded the PowerPoint and the other guides from the control panel under handbooks, under handouts, please do so right now. And any of these folks here are happy to answer your questions if you email them as is shown here on this slide. So with that, I'm going to close this off. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and good luck with your pursuit of graduate school. Bye-bye, everybody.